Yeah.
Man, you supposed to be recording. You gotta cancel that. That's uncool.
Low, nigga. Hey people, I'm Terry Bluez and I want to welcome you to Black Gift TV. Make sure you subscribe to the channel by clicking the icon below. Black Gift TV is your one-stop shop for colored content. It is the official channel for the Four Color Man podcast and the Dean's List streaming series. You also find music, stand-up comedy, and short film works. And if you like the content, make sure you visit www.blackgiftcreative.com, the official sponsor for the Four Color Man podcast merch. Black Gift is the brand that reps for the creatives of color. Whether you're an artist, educator, or entrepreneur, Black Gift is the brand that reps for you. Let's change the black nerd narrative and embrace our gifts and let this generation know it's cool to be smart. Now, let's start the show.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
Hey, what's going on, people? Welcome back to the Four Color Man podcast, Kings Building Kings through Candid Conversation. And today we got a very special guest. And like I said before, this podcast is not exclusive to just black men. Men of color, we all face the same issues as minorities in this country, dealing with our identity, race, and our masculinity, right? So today we got a very special guest because I mentioned this guy on the podcast before. He is actually one of my early mentors. You know, he kind of put me on to a lot of things, man. I want to put some respect on his name. Let's give it up for Dr. Joey Lopez. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, man? How you been, Terry?
Good, man. First of all, I want to appreciate you for carving out the time to come on to the show. Welcome to my animated studio.
Nice. I like being here.
I'm glad to have you.
I like your curtains.
So first and foremost, man, this guy right here, he is a professor. He's one of my early mentors, like I said before. When I was getting my degree at UIW, I think I had him like every semester for at least 2 classes. You know what I mean? So he taught me a lot. Right now, he's a professor at Texas A&M University, I believe, right?
Yeah, in College Station.
In College Station, right? But go
It's
ahead,
all
man.
good, man. Well, no, man. So I've been here for a semester. I'm like a hired gun at this point. I go to where I am called. And after putting in 40 job applications last year, I landed a gig and ended up out here. And evidently the last guy they had was a little interesting. So they were just hoping I wasn't crazy. And I don't know. The jury's still out on that one. But they definitely got the Joey experience so far. And being here at College Station is a trip. It's another world, you know? I mean, this is where a lot of the rural kids come, a lot of Houston people come. And so it just has a whole different feel, a whole different fez.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think people really understand this, but A&M stands for agricultural and mechanical.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of like farming or like
Yeah.
like 4-H type stuff down there.
Yeah, like there's a communications department which I'm in, but there's like also an agriculture communications department, and they have like a TV station. You know,
I think I applied for that shit.
you probably did.
Yeah, I've seen that job posted. I'm not gonna no bullshit. I've seen that job posted.
Hey man, if we cross reference what we apply to, there's probably a lot of cross pollination going on.
I know that struggle of sending out X amount of freaking job applications. And here's the thing, right? People don't understand this. In higher education, when you apply to be a professor, it's not like applying for a job. You need a CV, a curriculum vitae, which is a super extended resume, your transcripts, a cover letter, not only a cover letter, also a teaching philosophy. People want you to
research philosophy.
know all kinds of stuff. So
They want work samples. They want student work samples.
yo,
They want student teacher surveys.
and your packet is like 20 documents thick. And imagine having to do that 40, 50 times.
I was filling them out in my sleep by the end of the year, man. I just had a whole document template set up because it was just over the top. Like I would like literally find a job posting and in like 30 minutes I'd have it done, which, you know, back in the day would take me like half a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it definitely kept me real, you know. Having become an associate professor and not getting tenure at my university, you know, that was tough. And it definitely made getting another job that much tougher because the first thing they want to ask you is like, how did you become an associate professor and not get tenure? Like, are you crazy? You know?
Wow.
Because I don't know if you know this, but not getting tenure but becoming promoted is like a really like rare thing. It means that you did something wrong. It means that somehow you did everything right and this institution is saying we don't want you here. And so I had to literally like just flat out tell my story and say, hey, like my university shot and killed one of my best students 4 times in the back and once through the eye. And they would just look at me like, damn.
Yo,
You know?
and that shit was wild, son. Now, I don't want to get into that yet. I don't want to get into that yet. But I do want to get into that.
But that's real talk, man. Like I didn't want to get into that yet either as I put these job apps out. But I literally had to be very forthright about that occurrence. I will come back to it. But just so you know, like that's that, like your reaction. I'm like, hey, hold on. Like that's what I was, you know, that's what drove people away when I was putting all these applications in. It was, man, it was detrimental. That's why I was just like, man, I got to put so many sticks into so many fires because it's going to take a couple of people really reading into this. And dude, when they would call, like every call I got, I ended up getting on-site interviews with. Because as soon as they heard like me, they were like, oh, okay, this person's not crazy.
Yeah.
You know, this is what's going on. Anyways, yeah, dude, it's been a journey to get here.
Yeah, and I want to get into that, right? So let's back up a little bit, right?
Okay.
So you're a professor at A&M now. You were my professor at UIW.
Right.
Tell the people what you teach, what your degree's in, and what you actually teach.
Yeah, well, you know, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, right? And I went to inner city school, and I wasn't considered smart. Okay, so if you looked at like my standardized test scores when I was in elementary school and stuff like that, it looked like, you know, as a score, top scores were 40s, you know, because like I'd make like 35s and it was out of 100, you know. So it wasn't like people were going like, that kid's going somewhere, you know. And so when I was in high school, man, like it really took a certain kind of teacher to see talent in me. Not because I didn't have enthusiasm or that I was like a bad student. It was just that like I wasn't what people expected, you know. Yeah, but I was fortunate. I had some of those teachers that really went out of their way. And the reason I bring that up to talk about, you know, how I started becoming teachers, that was what like in the long run would end up being who I wanted to become, was like somebody that could have that kind of influence. And so, you know, I ended up going to this thing called Minorities Introduction to Engineering at UT Austin for a summer. It was like a week-long thing. And I didn't know it at the time, but like, you know, I got to see people that look like me. I got to see people that look like other minorities in powerful positions with powerful sway, and go to 3M, go to National Instruments, go to IBM, go to the laser labs on campus, you know, check out what people are doing in these cutting edge fields as minorities. And that just became a set expectation. Like I saw that and I could see, I was like, well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like, that's what people do, you know? But I didn't know at the time that that's not what most people get to experience, you know?
were you when you got to do that?
I was like 16, 17.
Okay, so that like you were in that high school age of like trying to figure out what you wanted to do.
Yeah. And I thought I wanted to be an engineer at the time, and so I thought I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. But I was also had like a whole other side of me because I really got into audio, and I was in this really weird situation with my family where my parents hadn't ever really been able to get out and do super well. They'd always tried to do that, but they ended up, just having so many problems. But like my last 2 years of high school, my other siblings had all graduated from high school. They were out, they were going to college. And so I just kind of ended up having this whole other experience with my parents. My dad's job changed, and they ended up having some extra change, And so I was able to like do recording engineering classes, and so I learned to become a recording engineer. And I started having like the benefit of kind of just being able to let them. They were able to give me some time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it truly was different. I was like a spoiled brat in many ways, but I didn't even know it at the time. I'm just real. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not going to like sugarcoat that.
Yeah.
Like I understand the privilege now. At the time, it just was what I was experiencing. But I ended up being able to get the opportunities to go to these camps, and the camps were free, by the way. I just found out about them. But that's kind of what changed me. And it gave me a trajectory to look at going to UT Austin. And I went to UT Austin, and I went to my mechanical engineering orientation, and it was like 95 white guys and like 5 women and me. And they said, this is going to be the hardest 4 years of your life. And my body just stood up and walked out of that place, man. It was like, no, I'm good. And I went over to radio, television, and film. Like literally went from one orientation to the other, and I walked into that orientation. It was just starting. They're like, "This is gonna be so much fun. Y'all are really gonna enjoy this major." And I knew my income was like going down the tubes. I could see like the worth of my degree just like taking. But I was like, man, this is where I need to be. It was like 60% women, 40% men. There were people of color. I was like, all right, like, let's see what's going on here. And again, like, I wasn't thinking of it that way, but like looking back, like I saw it reflexively, you know? And so that's like, that's how I got into academia. And then from there, I ended up just getting into this really crazy program, studying under this really crazy professor named Sandy Stone, M to F transgendered woman who is one of the founders of transgender studies, but also was a recording engineer when she was younger and recorded like Jimi Hendrix and Jefferson Airplane and Crosby, Stills and Nash. And like after that, she worked with like lesbian separatist groups. And then she got her PhD in the history of consciousness at UC Santa Cruz under Donna Haraway, who's like this huge feminist. And so by the time she came to us, I mean, like it's funny because again, like I went into this program and that's just what the way was. That was normal to me. Mm-hmm. So when I was in this program, the motto was make stuff, take risks, and be awesome. And you just made projects. And what you probably don't even know, Terry, even though I told you lots of crazy stuff at UIW, is like, I mean, what we would do there was legitimately avant-garde. I mean, Sandy was known for going around and doing a presentation about like neurology and rethinking about phantom pain and phantom pleasure. And she did this performance where she would reassign her clit to her hand and masturbate in front of the audience. And I'm talking like hundreds of people all over the world, man. To get them to think about how we think about gender, how we think about sexuality, how we think about pain, how we think about disability. I mean, deep shit, man. Like deep shit.
Yeah, that shit sounds wild.
And I know, I was teaching at UIW. It was this Catholic university. I wasn't going to go into class and say, "Hey, let's watch my former professor masturbate on stage, so that y'all can learn about thinking about gender and sexuality."
And that's coming from somebody who, and for what UIW was, I consider you somebody who pushed the limits.
Yeah, and I know when y'all thought I was like, they're like, "Man, that guy's controversial, man." You see what he's saying? I'm like, dude, if y'all only knew, like the kind of projects we were doing at UT, and even here at A&M, like you can't do it here either. You can't. I don't even know if you can still do it in general, because people have become so polarizing in terms of thinking in that space, in that arena. It's academia's has a certain mindset, and even when we were at UT, they were constantly trying to criticize this way of teaching and thinking and learning. But it's. I was recently on a Facebook group chat, or not chat, but Facebook group for people of color that are academics, and somebody was posting up about how they had released this book, and one of their references hit them up and said, "Hey, like you published this book that criticizes academia. Like, I don't want to be a reference for you anymore." And it was this, white male that said this. And one of the things about academia is that academics are really good commentators, but they're very poor participants most of the time.
Yeah,
Meaning that they love to have an opinion, but when you start taking some action, they're like, hey, watch your step. That glass ceiling, somebody told me that glass ceiling looks a little lower than you thought,
You want to know what? It's funny, man, because like right now I'm up in Minnesota, and it's where I work at is a liberal arts college, small liberal arts college. But every seminar, every lecture, every talk, every group tank, whatever, is about diversity and inclusion, right? And we actually had a seminar about this, and I want to get the guy on the podcast. His name is Dr. Jamie Washington. But basically he goes around to like schools, businesses, all those types of things, and gives these seminars on basically teaching white people how not to be racist, right? Like, but not negating what he's saying, because it's really legit. But one of the things he said is about like you mentioned the glass ceiling, right? It's lower than and he talked about like what diversity is versus what diversity should be. And diversity is focused on the demographic. What's our percentages, right? But real diversity is like, wait a second, because we had the statistic of, I think there's 42% students of color there now, which is a huge increase from like 10 years ago.
Right.
But the school average for graduation is like 92 or 93%. Don't get me wrong, I'm quoting that, but it's in the mid to low 90s, right? But the graduation rate for African American students is like 83%.
Yeah.
So there's a gap, and they talk about that gap being actual understanding of what's somebody else's experience is. Like, yeah, we've let you in, but then it's still like, oh, we let you in, but do I feel comfortable here? You know what I mean?
Well, and to take it to the next level is that's, there's a lot of initiative with that, with Title IX. I think they probably talk to death about Title IX at your school. I know they do at mine and at other institutions I've been at. I think, your focus for what we talk about, is kind of talking about the struggle of being an academic, right? And I think one of the bigger challenges is that we're telling these students, like, you can come in here and we can create this room for you. And and that's hard. But then it's like we're saying that, and then we're going to our faculty meetings, and we're going to our administrative stuff, and there aren't people of color. They're saying they want diversity and inclusion, but if you look at the actions, it's a lot slower than the lip service. It's one of those things where I've got a large percentage of white people telling me how we need to have diversity and inclusion and be more open to people and have our faculty look more like more representative of the students' population. And I sit there and I kind of look at it and I go like, yeah, that's cool. So like, are y'all going to give me like a full-time job or what's going on here? You know? And they're like, oh yeah, that's like really important to us. Okay, well, how does it work? Well, we don't really have that all worked out yet, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, get in your door into those interviews. Well, you know, and that's something that I keep seeing over and over again is that we're like in an infancy age of what I call D&I. I call it D&I, diversity and inclusion, where it's a great buzzword. There's a lot of cheerleading behind it right now. People, if they say D&I around town in the academic circles, people get all like, oh man, these people are progressive. And I'm like, okay, I'm cool with this. I'm fine with people throwing around D&I. But what are your actions saying?
Yeah.
What is your official policy saying? You know, are you saying this because you're afraid of getting sued? Or are you saying this because you genuinely want to engage? You know, one of the things I was talking to faculty and administrators about a bunch of universities, not just, you know, the one I'm at right now, is I'm saying, hey, you all say y'all want D&I, right? Now, when y'all go and recruit top tier professors to come and teach, you all incentivize them. You fly them down here, you buy them steaks, you tell them how you're going to give them this and give them that. I'm like, if we're talking about equity instead of equality, when you're doing those kinds of hires, how are you going to incentivize African American professors, Latino professors to be coming in to your spaces and feeling comfortable and feeling welcomed and feeling part of the culture, and that your culture is being recognized? I don't have to sit here and become you in order to be here, but that there is an open culture, an open dialogue that allows for otherness to occur, and it not be a situation where they're telling people to change the way they are, blend in a little bit, change the way you talk. Change, that's cool. You talk to the students like that, but when we're here, can you talk like this? Oh, that's cool that you like to dress that way, but when you come to the faculty meetings, can you wear this?
Yo, you know it's funny. Yeah, I told you, I was like, yo, you were one of my early influences on not giving a fuck. Like, and just being you, because I was like, yo, he was like, yo, my man came to class with shorts and a t-shirt and a mohawk, and made it a point to say, look, I ain't putting on no goddamn flex. Fuck you.
I recently heard somebody tell me, that kind of had some insider about my last job, and they were like, Joe, if you really like, if you had just wore pants and a tie and stuff, like, you probably would have been okay. And I was like, yeah, I probably would have been okay, but fuck that. Like, what does that really mean? Like, what are we really doing then? Like, are you paying me to look a certain way? Or are you paying me for my mind?
Yo.
Are you paying me for the way in which I teach people, and for my student teacher surveys, and for the employment that I'm getting these students when they graduate? Are you paying me to look like you?
Yo, and I made this point in a previous podcast, and I forgot who I was interviewing when we talked about this. And I think that I had this discussion with a few of my friends, but like, we talked about like how we dress for work, right? And like currently I look for, when I got this job, I looked for a dress code, and I couldn't find one. I asked my supervisor, yo, is there? He's like, nah, there's not one. Yada, 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 business casual. But so like the first week I was there, I was dressed to the T. But then I started seeing other people and they were like just in shorts, and I was like, all right, cool. So I could just do whatever I want. But I asked a few of my black colleagues in higher education, and like Yaki and Kid and all those guys, and they always like they dress in a like. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I feel like they like to dress up. You know, they're fashion-centric people.
Exactly. I was about to say his sneaker game, his sneaker to dashiki game is that's just fire, son.
Yeah,
that's just fire. But I asked like, yo, are we dressing for ourselves? Or are we dressing to impress them?
Right. And
it's to each his own. But sometimes I feel like I'm doing it for them. But you were always one of those people who was like, man, be you, because and what I always loved about it, because I said this, I was like, you were like, yo, I have my PhD, I've done this. Who gives a fuck how I dress? I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was like, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me, how the students are learning. You know, even if students were complaining about the way I dressed, I'm like, tell me how they're not getting a job based off this. Tell me how their education is suffering from this. Explain this to me. You know, y'all are all about quantitative data. Give me some quantitative data about how my visual appearance is offending you to the point of affecting your ability to learn. You know, and it was a joke. It was a joke, man. They just want you to look. You know, I mean, yeah, I could go on and on about it, but. You know, I showed up here to A&M and I went into orientation and then I went to the department meeting, and I was wondering, you know, I wore shorts and shirt to the faculty orientation, the campus wide one. I was like, I don't care. And, you know, I talked to the provost and to like all those people, and, you know, cause I know it's like, look, if y'all find me interesting for my mind, you're not going to even be thinking about what I look like. You know, if we're working at that level, then that means I want to be here. That means I want to work with you. You know, it's also a test in that way that I'm not looking for somebody to be into me for what I look like or what I drive or anything like that, you know? I want people in there because they see that I care and that I'm trying to make an impact on students. Like that's what I'm here for. And so I went to my departmental meeting and a woman brought up like it was kind of winding down, and I think they were trying to kill time. They were like, hey, why don't we talk about dress code for a second? I was like, uh-oh. I'm like, and she's like, you know, this is a business casual environment. You're going to need to wear appropriate clothing and blah blah blah, and kind of went on for like 5 minutes to kind of close out that session, you know. Mm-hmm. And it was everybody. It was like faculty and then the PhDs. And I was like, man, dude, like, I don't know if I can work here. I'm serious, man. I'm like, seriously, like, I don't, you know, you're already making me drive 3 hours a week to get here. Yeah. You know? And so I seriously raised my hand. And I was like, at the next meeting that we were in, and I was like, hey, like, y'all are talking about this dress code. Is that for real? And they're like, oh, no, we were just trying to kill time. Like, you can wear whatever you want. Like, you're fine right now in shorts and a T-shirt. I'm like, okay, good. Because, like, man, I was about to walk out. And I told them that. I'm like, because I was about to, like, say I can't work here. And they were like, oh, whoa. And I'm like, yeah, like, that's seriously how detrimental this is to me, because, you know, I have to be comfortable when I work. Yeah, I have to like be able to present myself in the way that I present. You know, like people talk about having like a cultural sensitivity. It's like, well, have a cultural sensitivity to me. And if you think that that's arrogant, or you think that that's self-focused or this or that, like, look at what I'm wearing. Okay. I'm wearing Old Navy and swim trunks. Okay. This isn't rocket science. I'm trying to show people that this isn't about, you know, anything you're trying to show. This is about your mind. You know, I teach people to take things they're interested in, take some theory or some technology, and take their heart and rub it together and make stuff. Okay? I don't care what you look like. I don't care where you come from. Everybody has unique stories. Everybody has something that drives them and that they're passionate about. So if they come from a tech-centric background, cool. Do you have some good ideas? Oh, you have some good ideas? What kind of tech do you know? We're going to be able to help you no matter what. So if you're a genius, we're going to be able to take you up a notch. And if you're a novice, we're going to be able to take you up a notch. We're going to work on that. And like, that's what I care about. And so, you know, kind of circling back to, you know, my teaching, I learned that through being at that special program under Sandy Stone while we were learning how to give presentations on how to masturbate. She also did this other presentation that was a real good trip where she was asked to give a talk about identity at an identity conference. And it was at MIT. They're pretty straight-laced people, if you didn't know that. They're real serious.
Yeah.
And so what she did was she got somebody to be her and go up and give the presentation. And then during the presentation, she had somebody call her on her cell phone, like call Sandy on her cell phone, and she's in the crowd. And so she takes this phone call and just starts talking during the presentation. And everybody in the crowd, you know, around her kind of starts looking at her. And then they're like, hey, you need to get off the phone. Like this, you know, this woman's giving her keynote presentation. And she's like, no, I won't get off the phone. And they're like, no, like you need to get out of here. Like, and so Sandy just stands up and like starts walking towards the stage. And everybody's starting to get really upset. They were like, you need to leave. You need to get out of here. And she just like storms the stage. And everybody's like, who are you? And she's like, I'm Sandy Stone. And everybody's like, oh, fuck. At this identity conference, you know, she's like trolling the whole crowd, you know, like causing a ruckus, you know, having somebody else do her presentation so that she can interrupt her presentation at an identity conference. You know?
Yo, that is a grand fucking entrance. That is a genius grand fucking entrance.
So that was kind of, you know, that was like I was being taught by this trickster that was like throwing high level theory out to like these snooty audiences in such a way that they had to take it. You know what I mean? They were being led in and then just being twisted into having to accept this irony. You know, these multiple truths and tension that we really are being ivory tower about this. We really do have expectations of who we will accept information from and what they look like and how they should act. You know, like that stuff has power, and it has underlying tones that like you have to kind of really process as a professor. You know, you have power, you have sway, and like how you present yourself and how you interact with others, you know, has impact. And that's another part of like going back to the D&I talk, the diversity and inclusion, is that like, you know, a lot of the quote microaggressions or a lot of subtle racism that people discuss are actually like often done by people with great intentions that really are nice people, but they just don't know. They don't know. They don't know they're doing it.
I say this all the time. I say there's a difference in ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance can be fixed. Stupidity is a choice. Meaning ignorance, you just don't know. And I can't fault you for that because I can correct you. And then if you continue to do it, now you're being stupid. I can't fuck with you. But like you said, like a lot of that shit is well intentioned, right? But let's go back a little bit because one of the things you said was very interesting, right? You came up under a mentor in your undergrad and grad years that was a very unique person, transgender woman of color. And what I've come to find is a lot of the people that influenced me have very similar stories, because I talk about this in my educational upbringing. Early on, it was very white. And then I went to the Army. Then when I got out and went back to school, like I was able to have professors like you in undergrad, Professor Fitzgerald, and then later in grad school, Yaki, Kitten, Jason, Cedric. And like for me to be at UTA, which is a predominantly white institute, I was able to have an entirely black with one Jewish guy thesis committee. Unheard of. But I was able to have direct mentorship with people who look like me, thought like me, not necessarily think like me, but understood where I was coming from. And so, but it's a pocket of that in a larger institute where it's not like that entirely. So like when you were coming up, yeah, you had that individual experience of that individual mentor, but on the larger scale, how did you fare with everything else? Because UT like is a large institute and
well, it's predominantly white.
Exactly. I was going to say it's not known for its diversity.
There were no other Latinos. So the only people that really like looked like me in my graduate program may have been someone that was an international student. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like somebody literally from Spain or someone literally from South America, you know, or Portugal. But they didn't have like the lived reality of having grown up in the U.S. and their parents being treated as second-rate citizens and their grandparents being treated that way. And then coming to an institution that was part of that power system, you know, and that still has systematic racism built into it. You know, I mean, you go and you look at all these other UT system schools, and they're all serving minorities. And then you look at UT Austin, and you look at A&M College Station, the two big, you know, research tier 1 schools, and they serve predominantly white audiences, you know, customers. And that's not an accident. That's systematic. It's an issue. It's something that has to still be addressed to this day. And so when I was at UT, you know, there were very few people that look like me. There were very, very few people who talk like me. You know, I don't speak Spanish. My parents were hit for speaking Spanish in high school. And so why would they want to teach me Spanish? And now we live in a world where it's like, you've got rich people sending their kids to dual immersion Spanish programs.
No, yes.
And I'm over here, like, people asking me, are you going to send your kid to a dual immersion Spanish program? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to. And they're like, oh, so you speak Spanish? I'm like, no, I don't. They're like, well, why don't you speak Spanish? I'm like, because your grandparents hit my parents for speaking Spanish, okay? Like, that's right, you know? So yes, I'm gonna have my kids learn Spanish, but it's pretty fucked up how I didn't learn Spanish.
No, that's funny. That's funny that you brought that up because I do have this with like all my like minority friends that aren't like black, right? Yeah. That parents come from a different country. I always ask them what generation they are and if they speak the native language. And what I always find is first generation speaks it. Second generation is the translator between their parents and the world. Third generation loses it because that generation doesn't teach that one because they're persecuted for it. Yeah. But you've just added another layer to say, like, now those ones that don't are trying to teach their kids the language. You know what I mean? It's a cycle. That's a weird cycle.
And it's messed up because, see, now my wife, you know, same age as me, she knows Spanish because her family was so poor that they all spoke Spanish, and they lived in a town where like everybody spoke Spanish. Her parents were migrant farm workers. You know, they worked in the fields, like literally picking fruit and vegetables. Like some of her cousins, you know, did that as kids and still do that to this day. You know, it's like one of the things that. I listen to Joe Rogan a lot, and I like Joe Rogan, and I don't like Joe Rogan. Like I have, and he recently had these two white academics come on and talk about some papers that they wrote to kind of troll feminism and question like cultural studies, and and things like that. And one of the things that I feel like they completely missed the point on, because I do agree that it needs to be questioned, like we can go too far. But one of the things I disagree on is I don't think they understand that like 2 generations ago and a generation ago, like in the 60s and 70s and in the 50s, you could be in Texas and just, if you knew Spanish but didn't know English, you would be put into a 0 grade. And you would end up graduating from high school when you were like 20, 21 years old. They would just hold you back, not from intellect, but just from the fact that you spoke Spanish. You know, they don't understand that like the residuals of the experience of going through this cultural shift, that was not just about how slavery was over 100 years ago and we need to move on, but that these systems of oppression are still fresh. The scars are still there. Like, yes, white people have been able to get over it pretty well and pretty fast and pretty easily. Okay, I get it. You know, I can see why they say move on, because that's their lived reality.
Yeah.
But when we're still having to face it in our streets, when we're still having to face it in our neighborhoods and at the universities, you know, it's different for us. That's why we have these fields. This is a reaction, you know. It was a reaction to the civil rights. It was a reaction to all these things that were going on. And like, this like postmodern wave that's happening right now in academia. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty out there, but like, you know, people are expressing themselves. People are putting themselves out there. And it's not about sitting there and thinking that these people are spouting off fact. They're like waves in the ocean, man, and they're trying to get the tide to move in certain ways.
Yeah. Yo, so backing up, you at UT, you graduate. Now, did you go straight to UIW or like?
Yeah, well, you know, I actually taught at UIW while I was finishing my PhD. I taught one like just the audio class in 2009, and then in 2010 I started full time. And when I got there and when they hired me, you know, one of the things that was real weird is that I had one dean hire me, and then they got a new dean when I got there, if that makes sense. So it was like the main boss that hired me left, and then I had this new boss, and this new boss was not a fan of me at all whatsoever from day one. And I'd get pulled in, and they try to talk to me about my attire and my mohawk, and you know, anything that anybody would say about me, they'd want to like really harp on it, only if it was bad. Like I had a really great PhD African American student write like a 2-page letter to them, singing praise to what I did. And I'll never forget going into that office. They called me in because they wanted to talk to me and kind of try and spook me. And they said, you know, we got this letter from one of your students, and, you know, we want to read it to you so that you can know, like, you know, we do think you're doing a good job. And so she reads like the first 3 sentences, and she's like, well, you get the idea. I mean, they wrote something really nice. And she just stops, and she's like, we need to talk about how you're dressed. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, is this real? Like, are you serious? Like you just skipped over like this 2-page, you know, thing that goes on and on about all the great things I'm doing. And then you want to talk about how I look. I'm like, it was surreal, you know, and I'm tag teamed in there with my chair and the dean, and they're just trying to figure out, how do we get this young kid, I was 29 years old, you know, how do we get this young kid to just conform a little bit and just be a little bit more like us so that we can feel good about him being here. And man, I had come from, you know, this place where we were learning how to teach people to do all kinds of crazy stuff and to really question and to think and to be intentional with your words and your actions. And I'm watching these people kind of like shoot a 6-shooter at my feet and trying to make me dance.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, not dancing. I'm not even moving. I'm not even flinching. I'm just like,
cold face.
hey guys, like I think you're shooting at my feet. You know? And it was just like I'm sitting there, and so I call it having enough stupid in me. Like I had enough stupid in me to just sit there and be like, yeah, nah, like I'm good with how I'm dressed, you know. And they would just be like, but you can't, like, no, we're trying to tell you, like, if you were to change, things would be easier. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. I mean, I'm fine with how things are. So if y'all want to make things harder on me for this, I guess I'll just deal with it. Because I'm going to stay the way I am. I mean, there's nothing in the handbook that says I can't do this.
Yeah, I was about to say, make it easier for who? Like,
yeah, you know, exactly. Right. I'm like, all I know is I'm able to do my job this way. And so I'm going to keep doing it like this. And they were just like, well, we haven't had anybody just kind of like literally ignore what we're trying to tell them to do, because they think they're nice people trying to give me a heads up. You know, they think they're trying to help me and turn me into this academic that's gonna be more acceptable and generally liked. And they didn't understand that, like, if people don't like me for the way I look and dress, like, I don't like them. You know, like, I don't know. I mean, this is like racism and discrimination 101. You know? Like, this is what we're taught, is to be nice to other people and not judge them. And we're at a Catholic university and you're telling me these things. So, you know, I know people go through this all the time, and I just would literally act like that. And other people would, you know, would ask me, they would be like, hey, like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, because to me, there's no other way. Like, I don't see a different way of dealing with this. Mm-hmm. I don't see, like, me conforming and just being a professor that everybody likes but doesn't respect. You know, I just can't do that. That's just not who I am. And so it kind of really, you know, it made things tough. Like, I had my dean one time be like, I want to talk to you. And I went into her office and she's like, I just want to let you know there's people saying some really mean things about you. And I like let that silence sit like that. And I just said, that's cool. You know who could do something about that? And she's like, who? I'm like, you? And she was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like, obviously you're not going to tell me who's saying these things. Mm-hmm. Obviously you know who's saying these things. So you should talk to them and tell them that they need to say it to my face. And she was just like shocked. You know, like, people weren't used to being called out that way. People weren't used to having that kind of conversation. I was, you know, the more I kind of went through these situations, and the more they said, hey, Joey, you're not going to be an institutional fit here, the more I agreed with them. Yeah. Does that make sense? No, yeah. And I meant it, and I meant it in a way that I don't think they understood I meant it. I'm like, yes, I am not like you all. I am not petty. I am not looking to judge other people the way you're judging people. Like, I am not a cultural fit if this is what you consider to be your standards for which and way you judge people. And I think that just has meaning in life. I mean, that resonates in general. And so, you know, it's kind of one of those things where I think you have to be reflective. I think you have to, in your jobs, you have to take your stand and decide who you're going to be, because you're going to do this job day in and out. You know, you're going to be showing up, and, like, if it's an abusive place, you're going to either end up being the abused, or worse, you're going to turn into the abuser. You're going to give in and just start becoming more like them.
Hurt people. Yo, that's funny you say that, man, because I was going to say, like, yo, you're absolutely right. It's, first of all, two things. One, yo, y'all proven that y'all want me here, so what the fuck is the point of me being here? I want to be where I'm appreciated, not where I'm tolerated. And then two, like, my thing with you is, like, you were always authentic and you cared, right? Like, yeah. I like how you said the one student wrote you this letter of all the great things. Like I could list all the things that you've done, like the whole like the Ann Arbor thing, getting me the grant, going out there, man, sitting at the table with these fucking rich white people. I'm spouting bars to them at the dinner.
That was so fun.
Yo, man, that shit was wild.
It was so much fun.
Yo,
well, and you know, I was up here talking to one of my colleagues who's a woman of color, and she was telling me that her brother's a rapper. And we were talking about that, and I was talking to her about academic rappers and you know, that culture, and I said, I know that that's not a real big thing here at A&M, but you know, I think that that's something that should be a big thing here. I think that that's something that like we need to openly understand, is that like the dialect and for which we intellectualize in is changing, you know, with newer generations, like how we discuss things, how we talk about things. It doesn't always have to be from a book, you know, it doesn't always have to be from a Western European perspective. And that doesn't have to be seen as ethnic or alternative. It can just be the way.
Or hip hop. Hip hop is the word for black. Because you know it's funny you talked about that, because previously one of my grad school professors, we had him on. He's on episode 2, but he's he's an English PhD, but he teaches digital humanities. And one of the how I've stumbled upon him, he teaches a class at UTA called the Jay-Z class. Basically, everybody knows it as the Jay-Z class. But what it is basically he uses digital humanities, basically data mining. Like all of Jay-Z's verses and what words he uses, how he uses similes, compares them to great literature. Right, and he compares rap beef to literature beef,
right,
and things of that nature. And he talks about how language has evolved, and how, like, you know, old academics will argue people are reading less, right? But he argues that people are reading more. But what are you reading? How are you gathering your information? Gathering information from an audio book is the same as gathering it from reading it, right?
And so and so how I'm crazy is that I don't even worry about comparing it to great literature. I don't even care about that. People be like, but dude, like that's how you're going to justify. I'm like, justify what? That I understand Western European dialect, that I understand like what we thought of as the canon because it was set up by imperialism, set up by people that were coming in and taking our culture. You see what I'm saying? Like, and we're really just relating it to the people in charge so that they feel comfortable with what we're talking about. Whereas, like, when I come into that class and they're like, you need to read Foucault and Baudrillard and Marx and all of these like great Western European theorists and literary scholars, you know, I don't understand it. I don't see it. It doesn't make sense to me. They're like, well, that's because you need to try harder. You know, I'm like, well, then you need to try harder to listen to Jay-Z. And you need to try harder to understand what Eazy-E was saying. And you need to try harder to understand what, you know, is going on when we listen to Jimi Hendrix and we try and understand, you know, what that meant from Elvis and what that meant from, you know, John Coltrane, and like how we understand a cultural appropriation from that perspective and how that actually applies to academia. And how that system of power, you know, is very, very insular. Like we talk about, again, going back to D&I, it's like, look at all the texts, you know, they're pushing us to go back to these texts for which they think of as foundational, for which they think of as seminal. That's why I don't know if you remember taking my classes, I just never made y'all have to read that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it. Yes.
I would just take it. I would be like, no, like, what are you experiencing? We can intellectualize off that. We can talk about that, because you know what all these people are doing? They're just talking about the romanticism of their young childhoods and what was relevant then. And that's what, if you look at every single person that writes, that's basically what most of them do.
Yeah.
They're romantic. And so even today I was teaching a class about video game culture. And I said, hey, look, like, here are these guys that and women that cover retro gaming. Okay, well, retro gaming right now is talking about Nintendo and Super Nintendo and Sega. I said, but, you know, as the field grows, like, you all are going to be talking about retro gaming from your years, your time. You're going to be talking about Xbox 360, you know, PS3, PS4, the anomalies between them, all the different stuff, you know? And they were just like, I was like, so when we look at, you know, the YouTubers that are doing these retro gaming videos, like, yes, the content's interesting, but what's the format? You know, what are the narrative structures that they're using? You know, because you can take that and go do stories about your retro gaming and your lived experiences, you know, what you're passionate about. And all of a sudden you're going to find that you have a format that's usable and consumable by mass audiences to get your information out. And they sit there and go like, huh. And so I just start going through more and more examples and really get them to think like, yes, like, we're in an information age where your ideas, your new ideas are what's driving culture. You know, it's not like we talk about television anymore. You know, it used to be that scarcity created quality.
Yeah.
Now we have mass social and cultural creation of yeah. And society sifts at a miraculous rate. And things come up, and you can have, I mean, think of all the YouTubers that have 1 million followers. You don't know, I mean, we don't know them all. You know, you don't know them all.
Yeah.
And yet these people have 1 million people looking at what they're doing. You know, they have, it's, and so when I'm sitting there and teaching, I'm trying to get them to understand, like, information is happening in parallel now. We're no longer trying to look for seminal information. It's not about pointing out that one person. It's like there are a lot of things happening all at once. There's cultural phenomena taking place in parallel. We're not sitting there getting to say that, well, it was just Jay-Z that did this. You know, it was a bunch of different artists doing a bunch of different things. And Jay-Z was influenced by these different things. You know, we can sit there and talk about the Gray album. You know, well, how did the Gray album happen? Well, Jay-Z released, you know, an a cappella version of the Black album, right?
Mm-hmm.
And DJ Danger Mouse took that and took, you know, the Beatles' White Album and mixed it together and made this whole other thing, you know, and that became like mashup culture became a whole thing, you know, and how we thought of as of cultural rupture. You know, trans media transportation of like social and cultural practices across the globe. You know, like just like how you look at anime and they have big eyes because they're trying to look like Americans. You know, and that's like a really crazy kind of connotation and an assertion. And not crazy as in bad or misaligned, like crazy as in like awe-ness of going like, you know, we have a need to produce other, to see commonality and create difference, but difference in a way that is compelling for people to be able to see and take note. And so, you know, that's like a really big part of what I believe in and doing. And that's the way in which I teach. You know, I do all project-based learning. I don't believe in tests or quizzes or things like that. I literally just have students do projects, and I tell them, I'm like, you're going to take something you're interested in. You're going to take some theory or some tech. You're going to take your heart You're going to rub it together and you're going to make stuff. And if we knew what that stuff was, I would say just make whatever. You know, we don't know what that is. And that's what makes this class hard. And that's what's going to make you mad, because you're used to saying, having a professor say, hey, this project's worth this much. This test is worth this much. This paper's worth this much. Here are the rubrics for the following things. Here's an example of what an A looks like. Here's an example of what a B looks like. Here's an example of what a C looks like. Decide what you want to do. Decide what you want to show up to, and just stay out of my lane. And we're going to get this done, and you'll get through my class. And instead, I'm just constantly going like, so what's going on in class? What are y'all doing? What are y'all interested in? What's happening there? And I can see they're looking at me like, dude, is this guy crazy? Like, I mean, he already asked us this. Why does he keep talking to us about being passionate? Like, what is that about? Like, why this guy cares so much? Like, this has to be fake. Like, he's doing this for his health or something, And I'm like, yeah. But I just play. Like I said, I play stupid. I sit there and I have to like placate a little bit so that they don't catch on to like me making them think and hit their head in a new kind of way, in a way that's making them have to think about themselves, about their own agency, about what they like to do and what they don't like to do, about how they say they want to be these things when they grow up. And I'm saying, okay, like you're about to grow up. So how are you going to make that happen? And I don't mean that like in that I'm trying to call you out and tell you it's not. I'm like calling you out and saying, let's make this happen. And you probably haven't had somebody genuinely say that. I spent an hour in my office hours today with a student who came in and said, hey, like, this awesome woman in my class. She goes, hey, like, I just don't know what I want to do with my life. And I'm like, okay, well, she's been in my class. She's been very participatory. But I was like, well, what do you think? And she's like, well, I'm really into entrepreneurism. And I'm like, wait, what? She's like, I'm really an entrepreneur. Like, I have all these business ideas. Like, let me tell you some. And she starts telling me like business idea after business idea after business idea. And she tells me about like previous businesses that she helped run, and how, she's like the first to graduate from high school and first to graduate from college in her family, and like how she's just really driven and she just, needs some guidance. And I told her, I was like, well, really, I think you're looking more for a journey than a destination. I don't think you're looking for a job. I think you're looking to see the paths you want to go down and find out about and experience. And she's like, no, like I want to live out of two carry-on and two carry-ons, and just have my car and like put my cat in boarding when I need to just travel. I want to do international business. I'm like, all right, well, let's start figuring out where you can, where you can go to meet some people that do startups and people that pitch for VC and get funding and start building a network. I was like, you need a network is what you need. You need a network of people. You don't have the network you were telling me about, which was in another state. I'm like, you need, where are you going to be living? She's like, I'm going to be living in Houston. I'm like, well, then in Houston, you need to start going and checking out like who are all the VCs, where are the 3-day startups, to kind of start pitching ideas and getting used to that and seeing where you feel comfortable. And she was just like, yeah, she's like, but I'll go do that anywhere. Like, you tell me, you recommend it, you introduce me to people, I'll do it. And I was like, I haven't seen somebody so hungry in a long time. I mean, just saying, this is like my comm student, and I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. This woman's unbelievably hungry. And she was just like a sleeping beast in my class, and I know that there's a beast in every one of my students in that class.
Yo, you know what's funny?
And how long is it going to take for that to come out in them? I don't know. Everybody's on their journey. Everybody will find that. But anyways, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, you were one of those people who made me turn up, right? Because I don't know if you remember this, but I remember this very vividly. And you may have a different memory of this. But I remember I was in your class. I don't know if this was maybe in the first semester or the second semester I was in your class. I don't remember. But I remember I was getting frustrated because, like, You first of all, you always give that spiel in class about like, you know, find your passion, find theory, find the tech, and then mix it in, and you know, mix your heart, yada yada.
Yes.
But I remember because like my thing was like, yo, I was kind of at the same crossroad your student was at. Like, yo, what do I want to do? Because I was doing music, and then that shifted into film, and eventually going to film school. But one of those things was like, I remember in your class, I would present my projects. Like other people would present, and you would get feedback, and then I would present. You'd be like, oh. Okay. And I'd be like, man, what the fuck? So I would present something again. You'd be like, everybody else would get feedback. You'd be like, oh, okay. I was like, fuck. And then I remember I presented, I don't remember what project it was. I think it was the dead battery joint, the joint I shot like in the parking garage.
Yeah.
And I remember after I showed it, I was like, all right. And then you like ripped that shit to shreds. And you're like, I'm gonna be honest with you. You could have did this better, yada, yada, yada. This was this. I was like, oh, fuck. But you know what? I took that and I was like, yo, I'm gonna go that much harder. And then after that, I was like, I think you kind of seen my progression and you seen it like, you know, I really wanted. Then like I got to, you know, get to work with you on like individual projects. But I've seen you do that with a lot of other students of like, you actually cared. You had like these groups of like taking students out on the weekends, the Convergent Media groups, all that.
Yeah.
Man, and I know.
Well, and what was really hard was like people thought that it was like some kind of club or like that there were people I had preference for. And it was just that these were the people that kept showing up.
Yeah.
They were all dorks and geeks. Like people saw Christian Rios and they thought he was like this, like some like bro. And it was like, dude, the guy just liked to play video games you know? And watch like videos on the internet. and they would see all these, you know, all these different people and they just kept sizing everybody up. And I was like, we're all dorks. Like none of us are cool. Like, this is not like what, you know, this isn't what you think it is. And so, you know, one of the things that was real interesting at UIW was that I go with what makes me happy, just like how I dress. So one of the things I realized was that if I just critiqued everybody, people would like be resentful towards me. It was like I was this catalyst for which, you know, people would get mad at. But if I just said, okay, cool, like next one, all right, go ahead. All right, cool, next one, all right, go ahead. You know, but if somebody had something that was like not that made me skip a beat, go, oh, hey, what's going on there? But hey, that's interesting. Let me tell you a little bit about what I think. And people would be like, well, why did they get talked to? You know, what's going on there? And it would be like, oh, well, I see somebody that's like starting to care.
Yeah.
Somebody that's doing more than themselves, doing more than just the project. And so I'm going to give them more than what I give other people because they're putting more into it. So it's like you showed a project finally that I was like, oh, hey, look, this guy's trying now. Like this guy's not just well, because like, you know, you're what I call like an underachiever, you know? You were somebody who was doing great things out of class. But when it came to class, you were like, oh, I'm just going to lay low. I just got to get through this. And then I'd just sit there and be like, all right, cool then. I'll see you later, like next project. And you'd be like, hey, wait, like, but I'm way better than this outside of this. Like, why aren't I getting any feedback? You know, and I'd be like, hey, man, like you bring your game to class, we'll start talking about it. But, you know, what you've done outside of class, that's cool and I'm supportive of it. But, you know, what are you going to bring here? Because like, when you have people start being serious in a class, that's one thing. Then when you start having everybody get serious in the class, you just see that whole thing start elevating. You see people feeding off of each other. And when you do it the way I do it, which is very positive, everybody's happy. It's not a competition. People want to help each other.
Yeah.
People are going out and like creating this space that goes way beyond like what would happen if you just had this negative Bosselwood kicking kind of approach to tearing people apart, you know? And that was like a very critical thing that I incorporated. And I learned that from one of my colleagues in the ACT Lab. I didn't learn it from Sandy. man, Sandy could rip people a new one. You know? It was brutal. And her protege before me, you know, would just jump in and double down. And it wasn't fun. It didn't feel good. And I didn't like that. And my colleague and Brandon Wiley and I came in, and we just went half glass full on everything. So people would kind of actually get mad at us and be like, stop telling us it's good. Like, tell us what's wrong. You know? In my head, I'd be rolling on the floor. I'm like, it's working. It's working. like they're mad at us finally, and they want us to like critique them and tell them what's going on. And I can tell them now, and they don't hate me. You know what I mean? They're excited that I'm telling them what's wrong with their project, rather than mad at me and going like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I give two shits about his opinion. You know, instead they're like, you know, Joey finally gave me some advice. Like, I mean, I don't know if I agree with all of it, but you know, that was kind of cool. And that's all I was trying to do. Cause like, you know, it's art, man. I can give you my opinion, but you know, the audience and you are the ones that, especially you're the one that decides if what you're doing is good.
Yeah.
You know, what if I sit here and judge you and tell you, oh, this is crap. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know, winning all these awards. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. You know,
Well, no.
so that's why I wasn't, you know, I'm always trying to be as open-minded as possible about these kinds of things.
Yeah. No, I didn't take it as like,
Yeah, no, I know you didn't.
Yeah, no, I was like, oh, okay. No, let me make it better. And I think, like how you said, man, it fostered a more cohesive environment. Because I remember, like after that, and seeing what other people were doing, like Ryan and Josh and all those guys, and then getting the link with them and work with them. Sort of, like I always said that, like doing that in undergrad and then going to grad school, who were working with people who were 10 times better than me. Yeah. And that honest feedback of like, yo, you know, and it was out.
You know, step the game up,
it was, but you either step up to the plate or you don't. You either take it as like, I'm cut out for this, or you take it in like, okay, I'm gonna improve. It's one of the But so, you know, moving forward now, we'll get in like, you know, you fostering such a great environment at UIW for students. You know what I mean? I remember when I got there, right? Like and this happened, I think my second semester, it was like the like during December, right? Like the late in the fall. And I think that may have been my first semester there. So I didn't really know them that well, but like, afterwards I knew everybody that was, you know, very close to him. But like, I remember that first semester I got there, like, you know, the shooting happened with
Cameron.
Yeah, with Cameron. And it scared me because I was like, oh shit, cops are shooting white kids. They don't give a fuck about me. Like, I got to get out of here, man. What the fuck? Like, no.
It's true. It's true.
No, that shit was wild.
Like, the sad part is that you're not joking. Like, that's not, we're laughing, not because it's funny,
but it's serious.
But because we don't know how to process it, and it's that uncomfortable, you know. And that's like that's real talk. Like, I mean, the essence of real talk. Like when people say, "Oh, it's real talk," no, like this is real talk. Like I take it really seriously because we laugh because we like. There's nothing else. Like, what other emotion do you use to kind of express the perplexing conundrum that was, you know, a university shooting their student and then trying to act like it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense. It's not logical. And then to add on the top that they're a Catholic university and that, you know, their mission statement is to help other people and be compassionate and to, like, you know, all these really positive things. It's like, hey, it's one thing to say something, but what are your actions? Again, diversity and inclusion, right? Like, what are your actions? You know, yeah, you can say that you have these ideals, but you're not exuding them anymore. And that's really scary, man. It was really scary. All my students were really scared. I'll never forget coming back from that funeral and coming into the parking garage, and my car had been hit by a student. Mm-hmm. And I had to call the cops. and all the students that I had brought back from the funeral were like, hey, we don't want to be here. Like, we don't want to see the police. And I was like, that's fine. Y'all can all leave. Police officers come. They're like, hey, as a woman and a man. I'm like, what's up, man? Like, my car got hit. Like, if y'all can write a police report, that'd be great. I was like, y'all know where I just came from. They're like, yeah, no, we know. I was like, I'm gonna be real straight up with you guys. And they were like, all right. I was like, the only way we're gonna get through something like this is if we just hug it out. And they were like, yeah, no, like, I was like, I know how it feels. Y'all are getting looks. People don't want to see y'all. Like, I know y'all are going through your own things. Y'all aren't him. Mm-hmm. And they were like, yeah. So they like write the report, and I'm like, all right, well, thank you. And they're like, oh yeah, you have a good night. And I was like, hey, like, we still have to finish this. And they're like, well, what? And I'm like, I said we gotta hug this out. Like, I'm gonna give you guys some hugs. And they just looked at me so perplexed, man. And I just fucking hugged both of them, bear hugs, And I'm like, I'm serious. Like, this is how we got to deal with it. But unfortunately, that was just not how this university saw it. They're still in litigation with that family. Mm-hmm. They don't want to compromise anything. They saw it as a pure monetary battle with them. And it's just sad. It's sad, man. It's sad. I took, 10 students to an open casket viewing where, this facial reconstruction has been done to this student. It was, it was hard. It was tough. It's like I would be in these faculty meetings and they'd try and blow it off. People bring something up and they'd be like, no, we can't talk about that right now, blah, 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 And I was just like, man, this is a joke. I'm over there at the funeral and the provost is asking me how we're doing. And I'm like, we're not doing too well. Like, I don't really want to talk about it. And she's like, well, no, like, I want to know. I'm like, you don't want to know. And she's like, no, like, I want to know. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, I'm talking to her like that. Talking. And for those of y'all that aren't in academia, you don't talk to the provost like that, just so you know. Don't talk. And I'm like, you don't know. And my dean, like the dean, I've been telling y'all about, is like, Joey says, you don't want to know. You should probably just leave it at that. She's like, no, I want to know. So it's like 5 minutes later, she finishes getting what I think about what's happening. And her hair is like blown back, because I really laid into them and just said, hey, like, you drag this dean's list student, Christian, Christian school, graduated, worked at summer camps in the summer at a Christian, church sponsored camp, was doing the women's league video about their programs, worked at Sherman-Williams and was one of their best employees, and you go and you drag this guy through the mud. You'll write all this stuff about him. You completely go on this cop side who has had 7 jobs in 5 years and was recently, called out for some stuff for which y'all didn't do anything about. What am I supposed to think? I'm over here with 10 students having to carry some of them out of the funeral crying, and you're asking me how I'm doing, Like, this is otherworldly kind of academia, So it was a trip, man. It was surreal. It's still surreal to this day. December 6th this will be the 6th year. I have a vigil with students. Last year I had it at my hi-fi store, and his parents come in from Houston. We're going to have one again. I just talked to Johnny, who was the student body president at the time, today, and was like, hey, let's, we got to get the ball rolling on this vigil and get everybody together. And so we're going to have this thing and I'll be there. And it's something I don't take lightly. And I stuck to my guns for it, and I lost my job for it at that university. And I do not regret one thing. I don't regret how I went about it, what I did. And I had to pay for it. I had to sit out a whole year looking for a job, putting in 40 applications, and I've had to sit there and explain to all these universities as I go through them one by one about what's happened. And a lot of them never called me back. A lot of them never even emailed me back because, I just look like this crazy lunatic, but I didn't care. It's worth it to me.
Well, so after UIW, man, you spend that year, sort of unemployed. I know you do a lot of.
Well, not sort of unemployed. Like I literally filed for unemployment from UIW and was like, y'all fired me unrightly. And the state of Texas was like, yeah, no, we're giving you your unemployment, man. Here's your money. And they had to pay me out. I had to hit up. I had to verify my story with UIW. Like the state verified it with them. So I told them I wasn't fired for any justifiable reason. Because if they fire you with reason, you don't get your unemployment. You see what I'm saying? And so they decided I get my unemployment. And so, I literally had to take unemployment, humble myself completely down, live with my sister. I'm married and have a kid, live with my sister, have my parents help me out financially. I mean, I ate some crow, man. Like I ate a ton of crow. It was like a buffet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man. Like, so one of the things we focus on in this podcast is masculinity, right? Like, and that traditional provider kind of role, and for you to lose your job and then have to, like you said, eat that crow. Like, your wife was still working though, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, she was working.
So she was a breadwinner. Like how, and just having a kid. How did that make you feel to have to like?
Well, and I suffer from anxiety, right? And so, it was just it was and still is to this day a roller coaster. I mean, it's there's ups and downs, and now it's like I have enough money to get by, and I don't have to have my parents help me. But dude, that year I wrote a whole article. You go to mygeekylife.com. It's called "A Year Jobless." I have photos, video, a whole breakdown of what I did that year to get through it. A lot of it was exercise. Like I just started working out nonstop. I worked out 3 times a week minimum, and I was doing weights and cardio. And I worked on my business. I started Dreamonoids Hi-Fi with Christian Rios. And I put my time and effort into that. And I kind of just had to make my hobbies and my passions larger than they were before to make up for the fact that I wasn't getting to teach. Because that's what I love to do. I love helping others. That's what my passion is. And since I wasn't getting to do that at the collegiate level, I just had to go and do it. So I helped file 2 501c3s last year, man. Just because I was not bored, but it was easy for me to do. And so one was a bike cycling advocacy nonprofit. I just helped this woman. This woman was like, well, you want to be on the board of directors? And I was like, no, I just literally know how to do this. It's really easy for me. And I want to see you be able to succeed in your nonprofit. And then another one was Spare Parts, which is a reuse arts advocacy group that take reusable materials and then create art curriculum and give it to teachers to be able to do art in classes because they don't have big budgets, Mm-hmm. And so, I was just going out and doing everything. Like I would say yes to everything. And I just tried to put as much good karma out there. And I just kept having to humble myself. And dude, even this month, my wife, I've been very fortunate that I studied car culture and I'm really into cars and I've had some really, really nice cars over the years. But I just realized, man, I gotta get really humble. So I bought a $500, 400,000 mile, Toyota 4Runner and sold my wife's Acura RDX. It's all pimped out and super nice. Mm-hmm. And just keep getting smaller and smaller, man. start trying to live off less and less and rebuild and be able to pay back people and be able to at this point, sometimes like, how people say, oh, I want to pay everybody back. It's like me paying people back at this point is just being able to take care of my damn self.
Yeah.
Not having to hit people up.
Yeah.
Not having to say anything, like being able to put the food on the table, pay for our kids' daycare and go do our jobs and like, do this commute every week and keep myself physically and mentally, straight enough to like be able to do what I got to do. It hasn't been easy. I mean, I'm not going to cry on your podcast, man, but
no, I'm not like, no, man, we're not there. No, I'm not trying to do that.
But it's, it's very humbling. And the other way I decided to deal with it, I'm just very public about it. I never want people to think that what I do is out of arrogance or out of self-righteousness. It's like I share my stories and I share my happy moments because I'm fucking happy about being able to do that. Like I'm happy when I get to take my kid to the park and damn it, I'm going to put it on Instagram. I don't give a fuck. People are like, oh, you only post your happy ones. Like, dude, I'll post when I fall on my fucking face too. Okay. Don't worry about it. Worry about yourself. Like it's okay to be happy. It's okay to celebrate those moments. We celebrate those moments because there's a lot of other hard ones that we don't like to talk about all the time. There's a lot of people going through stuff and like, I don't need to talk about that all the time, but I definitely like having happiness around me and talking about cool shit and celebrating cool shit with people. Like that's important to me. I value that,
Yeah.
So it's just, it's kind of just a different lifestyle, but I will say this, and again, like I don't mean this in an arrogant way. I mean this as in like, I am reaping the benefits of having that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
When I walk into meetings and I have that mentality, people like you being around. People want to hear more, and people want to say more. When you're happy about what's going on and are trying to see things in the best light, you can have somebody really upset and seeing something completely opposite from you. And you can ask them in the most friendly way what they think. And all of a sudden their tone starts to change. All of a sudden you're able to have dialogues that you weren't thinking were possible with these kinds of people. All of a sudden they just become people and you all start having these conversations and talking about things, and other people look at you like, damn, I couldn't get that person to just talk to me like that. I'm like, well, man, like, hey, I was in a job interview a couple of weeks ago and somebody was like, well, sometimes people kind of really have to have hard discussions here, and we're trying to make some institutional changes, and that might be very dynamic. And I tell them, I go, look, man, I'm going to be real with you. I was like, unless y'all are like shooting the students, I'm good. Like, whoa. And I got an offer from them, you know what I mean? So it's not like that went downhill when I said that, but it was like, look, like, I said, look at my hands. I said, my hands are soft, man. I go, look at the ceiling. Like there's air conditioning up there, man. Like whatever's going on, like life isn't too bad right now. Like, anybody who thinks that they need to get their blood pressure up about what's going on in this space here, man, it's like, it better be something really worthwhile. Because if not, I'm just gonna be like, that's cool. Like I got other things I can worry about, but it's because unfortunately I've gotten to see a lot of bad things happen to really great people. And I just see that, like, we're fortunate, man. Like as hard as it is to get to where we are, and as hard as it is as minorities to be where we are, we are privileged to get to do it, and I don't take it lightly. I take it very seriously. And like one of the things I love about you is that like you have very much the same approach, by doing this podcast, it's not like I'm concerned about what people think of us. I'm just happy that there's going to be one person that's going to hear it and maybe say like, hey, I can go do that. Or, man, I listened to that podcast over and over, and that's what gets me through things. You know? Like,
yeah, man. That's what that's what I love. But exactly what you said, man. Like you had that effect on me. Like most of the people that I've had on this podcast thus far have had that effect on me, and that's why I wanted to do this podcast. That's why I wanted to stay in higher education, so I could be that for somebody else. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Be that mentor. And I have people all the time, like, people I was in the military with. All that will hit me up on a random occasion, be like, yo, man, I see you do so much, man. I like, you inspired me to do this. You inspired me to go back to school. You inspired, like, that makes me feel good, man. Like, I want to change the world through inspiration, man. I think, like, having that mindset makes people want to have you around. Because it was something, I was listening to a podcast of something that Damon John said, and he was like, and it was funny because a student that came to me the other day and was like, they had to skip class to go to a networking event, which they get the job from. And and I said, yo, congratulations, because networking is way more important than your GPA. Because one thing David John said was like, yo, people talk about their resume, building their resume. It's like, your resume really doesn't mean shit. It may get you the interview, but it's really if people like you. Like, can I spend 8 hours a day with this person? Then yeah. But having that output of good karma, having that belief in like being positive energy, putting that out on people, and it'll come back to you, man. And
and I think, I think one of the other things is that, like, I think what goes unsaid with people like you and me is that, like, we've been in real shit. We understand real problems, So it's not like we're just hunky-dory for the fact that, like, life has been easy for us. It's because we know what matters. We know what when it's really time to be upset, and that has power. That has meaning. And so, some people could look at us, well, why are y'all so damn happy? I'm like, because, dude, like, there's a lot of other shit I could be having to do right now.
No, exactly.
That I don't have to do.
Exactly. And the fact is,
so if you think I'm too happy, like, fuck off. And they're like, well, that's kind of rude. I'm like, hey, isn't that what you wanted? I just gave you a little bit, I'm just giving you a little bit of what you wanted. Yeah. Now, do you want me to be happy again? Because I can be happy again, because that's what I like to be.
Like, I try not to sweat the small stuff, man. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's super deep. I got to find the humor in it to crack a joke about it some way. That's how I get through.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, man, I gotta get skedaddling pretty soon here.
Yeah, man, we'll wrap it up. I didn't want to wrap it up on a sad note, but yeah, that's a good note to wrap it up on.
Yeah.
And it's something I want to start doing. I haven't done yet, but I gotta add a tagline in this somehow. We're gonna start to close out the show with a quote. Man, like, what are you painting on your canvas? Paint us a quote on your canvas. If you got to leave us with something, what are you going to leave us with?
Well, this is all I'm going to leave you with, man. And I know you did. You said you didn't want to end on a sad note, but I've got to say it, man. Like, I got to say it. Cameron Reedus said it. He said, "Someday is a disease that will take your dreams to the grave with you." He said, act now when you have the chance. Act now. And, man, like, that has power to me.
That's deep.
I mean, the guy was fucking Tupac. He wrote that like 2 weeks before he passed away.
That's a Mac.
I mean, dude, that's crazy.
But I don't find that on a sad note. I find that very inspirational.
Yeah, no, it should be empowering. I'm just saying, like, it's crazy. And then, the other thing I'll say is that, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and I've listened to a lot of talks. And one of my favorite that I have to give respect to is a very popular one. It's Joe Rogan interviewing David Goggins. And I don't know if you know who David Goggins is, but he's kind of like this, I want to say cheesy inspirational guy, but he's kind of a cheesy inspirational guy. But this specific interview, man, like I literally ended up doing like this 56-mile gravel ride that ended up being like the bane of my existence last March. And involuntarily, I'm like going up this hill, like 4 hours into this ride of a 4.5 hour ride with an average of 154 beats per minute on my fat ass. And I'm sitting there just going, Goggins, like, I got to do this. Like, this guy this says, like, you just got to break through this zone. And I had never thought I could physically transcend myself, like in terms of putting in 110% physically. I just didn't know that was possible. I thought when your body gives up, it like all of a sudden you just stop. I didn't realize that there's a whole other wind in your sail that you can just keep going and not know it. And so I really recommend checking out that podcast, because to me, it may not resonate with everybody, but to me, it's one of the best podcasts I've ever heard in my life. And I think you would at least find it very interesting.
Oh, yeah, man, I got to check that out. I just got on to, like, Joe Rogan's been out for a minute, but I just got on to him. I just subscribed to him.
Yeah.
I gotta check on it.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't like everything that Joe Rogan does. I don't like all his interviews, but that one... That was like some of the most real talk, man. It's great. So I really appreciate you having me on this show.
Man, I really appreciate you coming on. Before we get out of here, go ahead, shout out where they can find you, your social medias, all that.
Yeah. So my Instagram is Joey Hi-Fi. My website's mygeekylife.com with a Y, like geeky. My academic and collaborative work is the THECM Collective, like Convergent Media Collective, thecmcollective.org. And my YouTube channel is DAYOJTL333. I know that's long. I got to change it. But that's where my podcast is at. It's called Helping Others. Just type in Joey PhD, Helping Others, and you'll find my podcast. And then, yeah, man, I'm always doing new projects. I'm always down to collaborate. If you hit me up, I will definitely get back to you. I am that person. I'm always looking for opportunity. So thank you so much again, Terry, for having me on this podcast.
Like I said, man, I did this podcast to just really have conversations with people I respect, man, and to let those conversations be heard by other people, because I feel they should be. This is very inspirational. I know we got deep for a moment and some tears almost got shed, but we left on a really positive note.
Yeah. No, it's cool.
Yeah, man. So we gonna get out of here. Like I said, man, this is the Four Color Man podcast, Kings Building Kings through candid conversation. This is your host, Terry Bluez. We out.